Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today, because we're diving into a seriously fascinating, yet kind of overlooked piece of ancient history, the Sātavāhana dynasty. We're talking about a massive regional state that controlled huge chunks of the Deccan plateau in central India for almost 400 years. Basically, they're the crucial bridge between the Mauryan and Gupta empires. It's a wild story, full of unbelievable wealth, religious blending, and truly global trade.
But here's the ultimate mystery. How do you actually reconstruct an entire empire when they left basically zero unified historical records behind? I mean, think about it. The Mauryas left us all those nice, well-dated rock edicts, right? And the Guptas had a super convenient, continuous calendar. The Sātavāhanas, no such luck. They didn't leave us a handy roadmap. It's like a giant puzzle, and we've got to piece them together from literal fragments.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just the sheer mind-blowing scale of their global connectivity. The Sātavāhanas weren't just operating in a bubble. They actually anchored one of antiquity's biggest commercial networks, the Indo-Roman maritime trade. They were out there literally trading local Deccan cotton and gorgeous semi-precious stones, like onyx, in exchange for just endless streams of Roman gold and silver. So to figure out exactly how they pulled this off, we're going to have to play historical detective today. Here's our roadmap. 1. The ancient Deccan puzzle. 2. Forging a southern empire. 3. The zenith under Gautamīputra. 4. Trade, wealth, and faith. 5. The empire's slow decline. And finally 6. The Sātavāhana legacy.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The ancient Deccan puzzle.
So, to solve the mystery of where they came from in the Western and Eastern Deccan, historians rely on 4 main pillars of evidence. First up, the Puranic dynastic lists. Now, these ancient texts give us sequences of kings, but honestly, after centuries of people copying and recopying them, they've gotten pretty garbled. So we have to cross-reference those lists with our second and third pillars. That's epigraphic evidence, meaning donative inscriptions we find in these massive rock-cut caves and stupas, and numismatic evidence, which is their incredibly diverse coinage. Finally, we look at foreign notices. Things like the writings of the Greek geographer Ptolemy or anonymous Roman merchant guides, just to confirm what was actually happening on the ground.
Section 2. Forging a Southern Empire.
So how did these guys actually rise from the ashes of the declining Mauryan Empire? Well, a ruler named Simika founded the dynasty in the Western Deccan, probably around the late 2nd or 1st century BCE. After him, the empire saw its first massive expansion under a really bold king named Sātakarni I, right in the early 1st century BCE. But then, things get a little murky. For the next century or so, our coin and inscription evidence just kind of dries up. We call this the obscure intervening century. It was a rough patch where they seemingly lost a lot of ground and political momentum to their rivals.
But let's rewind and look a bit closer at that initial expansion under Sātakarni I. He famously claimed this massive title, Dakshinapatipati, which basically means Lord of the wider Deccan region. And to prove he was the top dog, he performed these elaborate Vedic rituals, including the famous horse sacrifices, and handed out immense wealth to Brahmin priests. This was all about building rock-solid, orthodox Brahmanical legitimacy. Yet, and this is the really fascinating part, this very same royal family was quietly funding Buddhist monasteries at the exact same time. This brilliant, dual-layered religious pluralism, that would end up defining their entire run.
Section 3. Zenith, Gautamīputra Sātakarni.
By the early 2nd century CE, Sātavāhana fortunes had basically hit rock bottom. But then we get one of the absolute greatest comeback stories in ancient history, led by their most famous ruler, Gautamīputra Sātakarni. We have this highly boastful inscription commissioned by his mother, claiming he utterly destroyed his great rivals, the Shaka rulers known as the Western Kshatrapas, and specifically a guy named Nahapana. Now, you might be thinking, is that just royal propaganda? Nope. And this brilliantly illustrates why archaeology is so cool. They found the Jogathembi hoard. It's this massive pile of silver coins originally issued by Nahapana that were physically restruck with Gautamīputra Sātakarni's own name over them. I mean, it is the ultimate historical mic drop. Absolute, undeniable proof that he conquered his rivals and just seized their treasury.
And Gautamīputra's whole ideology? Just as intense as his military campaigns. He styled himself as the Eka Brahmana, the unique Brahmin, and claimed he single-handedly uprooted foreign lineages to restore orthodox Vedic order. Under him, the empire theoretically stretched from the Narmada River all the way down to the far south. But catch the paradox here. That very inscription boasting about his orthodox Brahmanical superiority,
It was actually placed at a Buddhist monastery in Nasik, a monastery that he and his mother were actively funding. So on paper, he was this fierce orthodox conqueror, but in reality, he was a highly pragmatic guy sustaining a totally booming Buddhist monastic economy.
Section 4. Trade, Wealth, and Faith.
After Gautamīputra, later rulers like Vashishthiputra Pulamavi and Yajna Sri Sātakarni pushed the empire to its absolute territorial and economic peak. I mean, the Sātavāhanas were literally anchoring ancient globalization. By controlling the crucial mountain passes of the Western Ghats, they controlled the flow of all goods between the inland Deccan plateau and the coastal ports. Just look at this exchange. From the Roman Mediterranean, they brought in gold and silver coins, wine, and fine glassware. And what did they send back? Deccan cotton textiles, semi-precious onyx, and spices. It was an unbelievably lucrative setup.
So, where did all that crazy wealth actually go? Right into the rock-cut Buddhist caves at places like Karla and Nasik. But here's the thing, these spectacular complexes weren't just quiet, isolated retreats for monks. They were strategically built right along those lucrative trade routes. They functioned as way stations, literal banks, and huge hubs of mercantile wealth. The Sātavāhanas figured out exactly how to perfectly bridge international commerce and religious faith.
Section 5. The Empire's Slow Decline.
Of course, no empire lasts forever, right? Let's move to and see how this builds up, because it really was a multi-causal unraveling. First, they faced renewed pressure from the Western Kshatrapas. A really powerful ruler named Rudradaman I took back those vital Western ports, which permanently chopped off a huge revenue stream. Second, the royal family started to splinter, breaking into competing collateral branches. Third, as the center got weaker, peripheral successor states, like the Ikshwakus and Averas, saw their chance and started carving out independent territories. And finally, the ultimate nail in the coffin, economic contraction. The Roman Empire itself entered a massive crisis in the 3rd century, and that long-distance maritime trade basically dried up. By around 230 CE, these 4 dominoes had completely toppled the central Sātavāhana state.
Section 6. The Sātavāhana Legacy.
Even though they fell, their enduring contributions to the fabric of Indian history are just profound. Politically, they were the very first to establish the Deccan not as some peripheral backwater, but as an autonomous, self-sustaining imperial center. They literally laid the blueprint for all the great peninsular Indian empires that came after them. Culturally, they fostered the incredibly dynamic Amaravati school of relief sculpture, and they promoted beautiful Maharashtra Prakrit literature like the famous Gatha Saptashati. And maybe most importantly, they proved that a state could perfectly synthesize orthodox Brahmanical rituals with massive, real-world support for Buddhist monasticism.
And you know, the fact that we even know this much today is a massive triumph of modern historical method. As our source beautifully puts it, careful, cross-disciplinary, and comparative source criticism has gradually transformed a once shadowy dynastic name into one of the best understood regional polities of ancient India. It took some serious detective work, piecing together coins, caves, and garbled texts to finally bring this lost empire back into the light.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought today. Think about the flow of ideas, art, religion, and trade back in antiquity. How fundamentally different would ancient Indian history, and honestly ancient global history, be without the Sātavāhanas serving as this crucial, wealthy, and tolerant bridge between the North and the South? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it sparked your curiosity to go out and explore even more about the incredible, interconnected networks of the ancient world.